So welcome to It's Not All About the Numbers, the leadership podcast that doesn't just focus on the bottom line. My name is Chris Argent and I am your host today with Mike.
Hello there.
And we also have a co-host who is the managing director of ITAS and host of the CFO 4.0 podcast, Hannah Munro. Hello, Hannah.
Hey, everyone.
So thank you for being with us today. And just before we get into everything, just a quick shout to say, if you are liking what we're doing, then do hit subscribe. And if you'd like to click those 5 stars on your podcast provider, it does really helps the algorithms, also helps us keep doing what we're doing and loving it. And the audience is growing every week. So thank you to everyone who's wading in on this. It sounds like most people are doing this on their dog walks. So talking of dog walks, how was your week, Mike?
You've trailed my answer already.
Yes.
Well, no, I've had a week in London this week, so I've been away most of the week. And I mentioned last week inconsistent sleep being a real energy sapper for me. And this week has been absolutely inconsistent sleep week. But it's been great being in London. We had the Gen CFO meet last night and I was on the panel. I'm sure you're going to talk about it in a minute, Chris, but I had a real sense of imposter syndrome sitting with 2 generative AI experts and little old me in the middle. But I got some really good feedback about being a good translator. Ooh, Chris seems to have vanished. I'm not sure if that...
No, I am here. Don't worry. Sorry. Don't worry about that. Oh, sorry. You're giving me some editing to do now. Just keep going.
You can't vanish because I thought it stopped recording. Anyway, yeah. So, imposter syndrome. I thought I had a bit of imposter syndrome, but got good feedback around translating. Really looking forward to the weekend though and recharging. And the plan is to get to the coast. That always puts things into perspective. You know, seeing the sea and just getting outside.
I've just got to ask about this imposter syndrome because I also noticed that you put on a jacket last night, which. Yeah. What was behind that? Were you sort of all of a sudden thinking, "Oh, I need to change how I dress to look more professional"?
No. So it's one of the things I realised a few years ago is I always, Hannah, for your benefit, I'm a t-shirt and jeans person. But I realised that because I'm always a t-shirt and jeans person, sometimes if you just change up, put a shirt on, put a jacket on, sometimes it actually makes an impact. So it's made an impact because you've noticed it. If I just wore a jacket all the time, you wouldn't even notice.
Well, fair enough. Well, I did notice and you look lovely. So
thank you very much.
Yeah. So Hannah, how's your week been?
Well, to be honest, I feel like I've missed out. It sounds like you guys had a right exciting event. So yeah, no, mine's been a good week. It's busy. I think everyone gets like this. As we go into the run up to Christmas, everyone's always like either going, I'm not going to deal with anything till January or actually I need to get this done before Christmas. So it's like, a million miles an hour. So yeah, it's been a million miles an hour kind of week, but I love that. I love a challenge. So that keeps me in my happy place.
Yeah, it is a bit of a busy run up to the week. I think we're now in sort of Christmas party season. I'm not sure how it is post pandemic actually, but I think we're still doing Christmas dues. And yeah, you might notice a slight change in my voice this week because I am a little bit hungover from last night, but it's all good. It was a great night, so really appreciate it. Hannah, busy times, but like, how do you kind of recover after your days and your weeks? I'm curious, right? Because you're an MD of a consultancy, got to be very busy. So how do you recharge the batteries?
So I've learned over the years that if I do stuff that requires no brain, actually I find that exhausting and I come out of it more tired. So for me, the trick I've found over the years is to find stuff that distracts me mentally, but is at the right level to allow me to recharge. So I pick up hobbies, and anyone that knows me will know I've got like a billion hobbies. I love to surf, snowboard, horse rides, I shoot, and now I'm learning languages. I'm learning Greek at the moment, just for the fun of it. So yeah, Kalimera, or Kalispera, technically.
Okay, good. Caught me out already.
And finding things that you enjoy that make you think, and also take you away from a laptop. I don't know about anyone else that's listening to this. I struggle to put the phone down, to put the laptop down. So horse riding is amazing for that.
I'm again feeling like a massive underachiever, and I don't do anywhere near enough stuff.
So my week was good. Yeah, as alluded to, we had our final Gen CFO meet last night, which was great. Good to have the London community back together, and a ton of great feedback. It felt like the real nice little cherry on the top of a very good year, and great to see a lot of positive feedback from regulars as well. You know, people who are enjoying being part of the community and coming back. We did then follow on with the Christmas do, which was great. Apologies about the lack of vegetarian food, Mike, because we ended up going to a Chinese dim sum bar, which was just a complete meat fest, which wasn't great for you, but apologies for that. On the professional side, had actually a really good morning event at the London Stock Exchange, which was with one of the community, actually, Baron, who's an advisor, Baron and Yang Wei. I think I might have mentioned it last week, but spoke really well. There were a couple of economists who were, all very doom and gloom about the autumn statement and the economy, and Baron sort of livened it up, which was great. So yeah, that was a nice little event as well. But this week's been interesting as well for a few people. So I don't know whether you saw the SpaceX launch, and this is a bit of a tenuous link, but I quite like stuff to do with space. A lot of the news, I don't know whether you saw that the new SpaceX launch and the rocket that went up, it blew up, and it was reported basically by loads of people that it was a failure, and they were saying that. Look at Elon Musk. Mike, I even think you referred to it in the last podcast, like don't do what Musk did because it blew up, right? But actually, when you start digging into this, rather than listening to the hype and the public media, you listen to the engineers, right? This isn't failure at all. What do we think about, this and their approach to it?
So my immediate response is that it is the living embodiment of the fail fast software development environment that we see. Build things, get them out there, get people to test them, break them, learn from it, iterate, and go again. And I suppose when I was thinking about it, test pilots in like the 30s, 40s, 50s, when they're flying planes, didn't have social media and instant news to contend with when they were going up in planes and they were crashing and people were ejecting out as they were testing them. So I don't think it's any different. It's just, I think everybody wants Elon to fail.
Oh, so it's a personal dig rather than a professional dig.
Like, I think as a business leader, like when you're leading a team, you've got to encourage failure, which is sometimes hard to do, especially when you can spot it coming. But the whole thing around the news, I guess my perspective on it is that stakeholder management, like how did he set the expectations? He set the expectation that it was going to launch and, go into space. But actually it should have been this is a test flight. We just want to see what's going to go bang. And if he set that expectation, then he wouldn't have had as much blowback, I think, as he did. So I would say is that I agree with the philosophy, but actually he could have managed stakeholder and the perception of his project a bit better.
I think you can see that he probably needs to hire a few public relations experts just in general, right? Not just about SpaceX.
Yeah. His personal and professional life is a bit all over the place, but that's another podcast, I think. Yeah, it's quite interesting because when you actually listen to the engineers at SpaceX, that the way they look at this is, well, we now have 1,000 changes to make, right, to make sure that Starship, which is the massive rocket that they just put into space, second launch is much better. But what I feel is quite interesting about this approach now with SpaceX is that there's a sense of inevitability about this, that they are actually going to do it, because this has happened already. I don't know how close you are to this, but the SpaceX Falcon rockets that went up, and these are the reusable rockets that fly back down to ground and land after propelling the rocket up into space, and then they're reusable, which is where a lot of the cost is. That's the real revolution here. It took them I can't remember how many, but, let's say hundreds of flights to actually perfect that. But they did it in the end. And it went from crash after crash after crash to this is bonkers, to people starting to think of it as a bit of magic. And then you see it happening every single time, like it's some sort of sci-fi film. And you're like, wow. And I think that's what's quite interesting about their approach is that, okay, maybe they managed the comms badly, but I reckon they're going to do it. But it's just a case of, will they do it before the money runs out? And I think in this case, they probably got enough money.
I also think it's really great that you speak to the engineers and they're like, yes, we found loads of stuff, right? And that for me, for all of his faults, like he's got a team that's really excited for the mission. He's got a team that's on board that doesn't feel afraid to fail. And I think, we should look at that and go, actually, there's quite a bit we could take away from him when, for transformation projects about how we actually hit that goal, hit that purpose.
I think that's exactly right. I did it myself a few minutes ago. Everyone likes to have a little dig, right? But I think you're absolutely right. That the environment that's created around the teams is clearly going to deliver. I mean, NASA itself is basing a lot of its future planning on it being successful, on SpaceX being successful.
And I reckon they'll do it. I reckon they'll do it without a doubt. Yes, it's costing them a lot of money, but what's the upside of them doing this? Multi-planetary rockets or, blasting around the solar system. That is just crazy.
I was just going to say that you're making me think of my other recharge that I do, which is watching old Star Trek series. You're just reminding me.
Are you a Picarder or a James T. Kirker?
I don't think I should answer that. I think we should move on.
Okay, that is not a problem. So moving on. So Hannah, a bit more about yourself. We've known each other for a while. You do a fantastic job on the CFO 4.0 podcast, which I've had the pleasure of being on a couple of times. You're a fantastic interviewer. And I think, we need to do more of this. The grassroots podcasts can all support each other because there's not enough conversation that's happening from people who really know what they're talking about. You're an implementation consultant, I suppose, using the CV name. But what is that, and what do you do?
So certainly how I see my role, and certainly within ITAS, we have different types of implementation consultants. That's the first thing, is that not all implementation consultants are created equal, but I'm more of a solution architect. So I help people build the picture. So I take a step back and look across and go, right, what are all the pieces of the puzzle we need in place to make the overall architecture work really well? So and I tend to work more at the front end of a project, which is the design phase, the process re-engineering, understanding the data architecture. That's the bit I really enjoy. But in order to make that work, you kind of have to know what you've got to play with, because as an individual, and certainly as a business, which is taking my philosophy, is I don't believe in bespoke development. So I've got to understand the technology I work with. So that's why I have a technical bent, but certainly my role is all about helping people figure out what do they need to change, whether that's technology, processes, or supporting sometimes with people change to actually achieve the goals that they want to as a finance business structure.
Would you say, so just sort of playing that back, the role that you play in that front end bit is really understanding the problem and getting your head around the organizational problem and exploring that?
Yeah, so a lot of the tools and techniques that because I do various financial transformation sessions on my podcast, and the bits I enjoy is actually just kind of going in and going, how do we make things better? So is there a particular challenge you're coming? So the challenge could just be, we've got too many spreadsheets around the organization. So the automatic assumption is that it's just reporting, but it may not be. And I think there's a lot of assumptions that go around making changes in finance, particularly around technology. There's assumption around the way that processes work. There's an assumption around what a particular technology can do. And actually, I see my role as unpicking the assumptions, going, what's the problem? Do we actually need to change the tech to make that process better? Or is it actually that we need to rethink how our process works? And yeah, so I do a lot of challenging, especially for people that are in the market for new technology, going, right, well, what is the actual problem? What is the why behind what you're doing? And and that's certainly what I try and coach my team to do as well.
So Mike and I sort of talk about this mission to try and drive down transformation failure, right? That's kind of underpinning what we do. And, failure seems to come when you're not using the technology properly. You kind of said there that maybe we're changing, customizing the technology unnecessarily. Failure can also come from the implementation itself. But failure tends to come mostly from people not adopting or changing, and it's the people side of things. But are we talking too much about, people and tech, and we should actually be talking more about the bit in the middle, which is implementation, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the problem. And do you know what's really interesting? When people go out to market for a new finance platform, say, right, they'll go to 3 different vendors, 3 completely different pieces of software and go there. They're not going, we think we're going to look at these 2 vendors, but for that vendor, we're going to look at 2 or 3 partners. Isn't that interesting? So, and actually, I have a very different implementation methodology, and I know I do, even though the structure might be the same as another partner, how I do it and the things that I put in place to make sure ours are successful. And to put this into context, we've got like 100% retention of our intact customers. That's because all throughout the process, from the beginning through to the middle to the end, we're looking at, like, it's not just about the technology, it's about how you use it. And the amount of people that come into a conversation and they haven't thought about how they're going to resource it. They might ask us, if we're lucky and they know what they're talking about, how many projects have you done? What have you got, any case studies, which are great questions. But they're not thinking about, have I looked at our resource within our team who are already stretched, who are already working late on month end? Have we actually got the resource to make this project happen? And I think that's the bit that everyone forgets about, because that tends to be the bit that causes the problems, is not necessarily the technology. It's how that technology has been implemented. And I genuinely believe that an average piece of technology implemented well is better than a good piece of technology implemented badly.
The question, I've got a sort of question around the effort or the time it takes. So organizations usually, well, in my experience, we've already decided what kind of bit of tech we're going to buy. We're going to buy whatever. How much effort do you think needs to be put in place in front of that decision in an organization, if that makes sense? So it's almost like that bit of the effort to understand the problem better, to make sure you're actually procuring the right thing.
When I recruit, when I look at a new piece of software, I want to know what's the philosophy that software follows, right? Is it an all-in-one solution? Or is it a connect the dots kind of put your puzzle together kind of solution, right? So I think people need to figure out what their strategy is, right? I think they need to understand what their problem is. And I'm personally not a big believer in massive sets of requirements, because I think what that does is that hamstrings you into a conversation about, does this software tick this feature set, versus here's my process, this is what I need it to do, this is how I need you to fix it, as in I need to be faster, quicker, more scalable, and actually using the technology in the best way it possibly could be designed to do. And kind of going back to you said a really interesting thing earlier, Chris, about, we have a tendency to go into solutions and go, I need the tech to fit around me. And yes, you need it to get close to what you need, but you also need to ask the question as a business, if most of the software out there doesn't work in a particular way, why on earth are we working in that way? And I think that there is a bit of self-challenge, and there's not enough of that at the beginning part of the process around requirements gathering that is actually about challenging the organization back. So why are we doing this? So do we actually want to replicate this? Is this really adding value to our organization? It's
interesting where, we talk a bit about this in terms of focusing on outcomes and people rather than technology itself. And it sounds like you can almost get a little bit, I think you said hamstrung by requirements, right? Because there's a risk that you go through the due dil and, you tick all the boxes, but you don't actually lean into some of the harder things to fix, like, the number of people that you have to deliver this, or the embeddedness of technology within the organization, for adoption. And there may be there are softer sides to even process, that need to be considered. But you get this very detailed document, right, which on paper sort of says, yes, we're ready to go, but there's something missing. It's kind of the glue.
Somebody said to me years ago that one of the problems that we have when we're doing requirements is we're effectively concreting the cowpaths.
Yeah.
So you've already got your direction. You think you know where you're going, but even if it's the wrong direction, you're just reinforcing it with what you do. You're basically plotting your route based on how the cows wandered across the field rather than actually the straightest point from A to B.
I think that works. It kind of goes back to Mr. Musk, right, and SpaceX, right? If they had and this isn't about project management, but if they had a waterfall approach to delivering a hard set of requirements, they would not be doing what they're doing today. And you would not feel that they were going to achieve it either, So I wonder how detailed the requirements are on their side, right? Because they'll certainly be ripping them up daily if they did exist.
I think they'd be focused around the use cases. So I am in my own time looking at how I build out a template so that around use case requirements versus detailed feature requirements, right? And I think that's where we're going wrong, because feature requirements are the way that we're always told to do it. If you go speak to any of the big four, they will produce a set of requirements and hand that over and do that. The problem with that is, like you say, a box ticking exercise. It's a risk minimization exercise, and they spend a lot of time putting that together. It's a very expensive process in some instances. But what it doesn't do is go, this is the use cases and the assumptions that our business operates on. How should our processes look? Yeah. And then challenge, and having that effective challenge back and forth between the technology vendor or a consultant to go, show me how my processes could look in your world. Show me how I can take advantage of all this cool new tech you brought.
Just bringing this a little closer to home. So, do you implement any of this with your own team? And what's your personal approach to how you do things at ITAS?
So we actually have a team implementation model, because I've always believed that everyone has different strengths, right? And I think there's a danger where I've been the lone consultant on a project, and I think, one, it's a really lonely place for a consultant to be, but also it's a really dangerous place for a project to be, is reliant on a single person, a single brain. So I've built a methodology with my team where we implement as a group. So we'll have like a senior consultant, especially if it's a big transformation project that's kind of stepping back and really keeping that big picture in mind. We'll have somebody that is focused on maybe the technical capabilities, that's really good on, right, this is the problem, right, what options have we got, and kind of figuring that out. And we might have somebody in there that's really good around the training, coaching, mentoring, question answering, and be the support. Because as you know, no one team is the same. I'll have some teams that they just get stuff and they're so quick and they're so technically capable, and then I'll get the more slower moving, that person's been there for 20 years, and honestly they've got to figure out how to open an app. You've got the extremes in finance. So we try and build a team around an implementation that plays to the strengths of the customer, but also plays to our individual strengths. And, my team individually are better at different things than I am, but together we're an amazing consultant.
That sounds brilliant. And that kind of multi-skilled team, I think you end up with like one great delivery. How did you get there? How did you work out that was the approach? Was it trial and error or an epiphany?
I think I don't know, because I think because I came into consulting quite young. So I was, when I first came in, I was in my early 20s. And if you think about what things were like 15 years ago, being female was one thing, being young and female in the finance tech world was like a real anomaly. So because I didn't have any preconceptions coming in, I think I just tried different things. I also trained a lot of the team up in the way. And so because I was managing them and training them, I'd say, oh, you're really good at this, right? Oh, I'm on this project, you'll do here. Or because I was selling, I'd say, oh, that consultant, that personality fits really good there. And then it's just become like the way that we work. It just organically has grown and gone through. And I think because I've been on the other side where, you've had a consultant leave, or you picked up something that someone else has implemented 3 years ago and nobody can remember what was happening, what has happened. So we have a really, we try to build a rigorous process around implementation that's always evolving. So that whole fail fast, yes, but also how do we feed that back and stop it from failing at the beginning, whether that's how we sell, how we implement. And then it was just, we had so many different personalities because I was a bit of a strange person in the implementation. I didn't look for more people like me. I was looking for different individuals with different strengths. And so then we have to find the match, because it's always about the match in terms of, and that's what people should be thinking about when they're looking for a partner. We're not the perfect partner for everybody. Yeah. It's about finding an implementation partner that one gets you, but also is a good fit for your culture internally.
It sounds like you've walked the talk there, right? It's almost like you've run your own implementation project, running your own company.
Yeah, and I think because the philosophy I've always had is that I treat every customer as if they were my friend, not as in joking around, though we like to think I have a decent sense of humor. But fundamentally, if I wouldn't recommend one of my consultants to my friend, I won't have them in my business. And I think because of that, I go, if I think about if you think about your friends, you know their personalities, you know what they're like, you know how they're going to react to a situation. And I try and anticipate that with my customers. They're going to enjoy working with a person because that culturally and also how they deal with situations will work really well. You've got certain people that are really patient, that don't mind the same question 5 times over. And you've got others where when they've got really hard and tricky technical situations, they're amazing.
I think that's a really important point of difference, though, but between consultancies and implementation consultants, right? That you're actually saying chemistry is really important. And I don't think it's a consideration in a lot of projects. You literally just have, a combination of grads, mid consultants and senior consultants turning up, and you just got to get on with it, right? But the chemistry thing is a really interesting angle. Is that a bit of a luxury at a company like yourself? And can you see that's a challenge for the bigger consultancies?
Shouldn't be. But I understand why it is, because most of them have a framework in which they hire. They look for what is a repeatable success in their recruitment framework. You think about the Big Fours, they have this matrix of tick, 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 tick. Yeah. And actually we hire on values, not on the tick boxes. And I love it when I rock and when I go, oh, I'm not sure if culture, that's a good fit, I go, why? Is it because of the values, or is it because they bring something different to the table? And I did an amazing podcast around diversity. Diversity is about more than the color of people's skin, the sex, their orientations and things like that. It is about backgrounds. It's about communication dynamics. It's about all of these things. And I don't think enough. I think so much focus on those big companies around that is around the formal definition of diversity, rather than backgrounds. And so they don't, and also as a small business, I don't have the luxury of an entire waiting list of first class graduates, and I've got to do 50 interviews to find the one graduate. I've had to build and train talents, and I've had to find the right talent. So it's a whole different recruitment dynamic.
You remind me of one of the best, I think the best team I ever worked in. I think individually each person in the team was quirky would be a fair comment, but actually when you put them together, that kind of like the diversity of thought that you got, and I think that's what you're talking about, is that diversity of thinking and approach was really powerful. What's gone through my head is you've described a really kind of what I think is a brilliant approach to kind of the matching. You know, I wouldn't recommend them if I wouldn't recommend them to my friend. I just wonder if you've got an example of when you've said no. So you've actually been working with somebody, or you've been in those initial discussions. You just thought, I just, even though you're going to pay me, I'm not going to be able to make this work.
Yeah, I have actually. So, so I actually had a conversation, and they gave us this list of requirements around business background. Do you have this? Like, honestly, this list was huge. And I went, guys, who else are you looking at? And they're like, well, we're looking at these guys, and there were big names, like consultancy names. I'm like, you're in the wrong conversation, right? One of us is, either they are or we are, because we're a boutique agency, right? We're small. I'm not planning on world domination and being one of the big five. Yeah?
Not this year. Not this year.
Yes.
Maybe next year.
No, yeah, I wish. But no, actually, don't wish. That's the point, right? Because I don't think the engine that drives those consultancies is not what drives me personally. So when I talk, one of the biggest measures of success in our business is case studies. And I think that says everything about what drives our business. Whereas you go into those, it's billable hours, utilization. It's all those kind of financially driven metrics. And yes, the business has to be profitable. Yes, it has to grow and all those kind of things. But actually, that can't be the reason in fact, I don't want it to be the reason my business exists.
I think there's a book in me somewhere, because I think when I talk to people, there's almost like this startup approach that I think would be really helpful to any CFO, enterprise CFO, mid-sized CFO. They're not going to start up a company, but some of these behaviors that you're talking about are so powerful. I think, your point around recruiting on values and behavior, it's a really simple thing to do. If you do it consistently, you get an incredible team, supporting your goals in the way that you want them to be supported, and right sizing your ambition and your team. You're saying, look, I want to be a boutique agency. That's brilliant. And I think all these sort of startup lessons are really valuable to leaders in any size company. But can you see the link there? You work with larger companies as well, Hannah. It's a lot of behavior here that could help them.
Yeah, and I'm going to be honest and say we haven't nailed it perfectly. I think anyone that thinks they have hasn't. I think that's again one of the key aspects of an effective of a business, is to kind of acknowledge that you're not perfect and just focus on the areas that you want to improve. And it's that entrepreneurial mindset. That's what we want in CFOs. We want them to think like entrepreneurs, to go, where's the opportunity? What's the value as a finance team we bring to the organization? What's the value that the organization doesn't even know we can bring? And how we build processes and structures, and how do we measure that output? And yeah, I love that idea, Chris. That would be a really awesome piece to say, how do we bring all this entrepreneurial mindset into finance and use it to drive value?
Yeah, I've got a little bit stuck on trying to think of a title for the book, but the point I was going to make is I don't think it's just for finance leaders, right? What you're describing is almost something that business in general would benefit from, is just some of these tools and thought processes of a startup. Excellent.
Well, great insights there, and it's nice to sort of hear a little bit more about what you do. And I agree, maybe I'll come back for this co-author deal next year. But if you would like to ask any questions to our speakers or to Mike and myself on the podcast that we'll answer for you, then now's the time to do it. If you send your questions to podcast@generationscfo.com, who produced the podcast, we'll happily include them. And we've actually got a question here this week. So there's a lot of discussion that we have, and we've probably done it again without realizing it this week, but there are some things that we talk about that aren't really commonly known. And one of the questions this week was around that. Last week, we were talking about Katrina Williams, who was launching something within the government finance function to 11,000 odd people, and that she was very excited because it was go, no go day. Now, you can have a guess at what happens from a go, no go meeting, but the question was, what is a go, no go meeting, and why is it so important? Who wants to have a go at that?
Well, I can tell you my misunderstanding when I first read the question, which was around whether you should how do you decide whether to go to a meeting or not go to a meeting, was my initial thought. And there's definitely been occasions where I've opted out of meetings. Yeah, well, that can be the case, but when you're working from home, it makes it a bit more difficult. But in terms of the actual question, now I understand it. It's literally that decision point. It's actually getting everybody in the room together to make the decision and having that formal sign off that you're going to spend the money on the thing, or you're going to, in that case, roll out the piece of software, I think.
Yeah. So there's often a decision point in an implementation where you have to make the choice about whether to go, right? You have to go, are we ready to go live? And I always say, I think with those meetings, it's a bit about, you've got to resist the pressure of expectation, right? Because it's a lot harder. If you've ever had, I talk about this a lot this week, actually, but if you ever had bad electrics done on a house or done by somebody that doesn't know what they're doing, you will understand the pain of trying to unpick stuff that has been done. It's much better to do stuff right the first time. And I take that philosophy with go lives is, yeah, you can clean up around the edges, but fundamentally, are you genuinely in a position where you can go live with this and it will be a success? And you need to bring all of the risks, all of the challenges, any areas where you don't feel like you tested thoroughly to that meeting, and make sure that everyone's onboarded and ready to go. And we would call it a go live planning meeting. Mm-hmm. But I quite like that go no go phrase, as it were. But yeah, it's about saying, are we ready to take the next step?
I really like how you said that then, the wiring analogy, because it made me think of what you were talking about before with regards to the implementation consultant role, which is actually what you're doing is you're laying out the wiring properly to make sure when you get to that point, you don't have to go back and unpick the mess. And I think that links together really nicely.
But I'm going to be able to say that go, no go piece, you should know, everyone on the team should know where they're at before they get there. That for me should be the icing on the cake. Yes. Yeah. If people are coming into that meeting and there's new stuff coming up, then somebody's not managed that project effectively. Like, there is a bit about it should be a foregone conclusion pretty much by the time you get there.
I think if you listen back to last week's podcast, Kat was pretty sure which way it was going to go, and it did. It was
well done, Kat.
It's a good point. It's a good point, though. I think sometimes people enter into meetings without a plan or without having prepped, and they let it just unfurl in front of them, and that's definitely not the way to manage these things. But yeah, brilliant. So, well, moving on, we each week we do our good data, bad data, and the good data from me is that it's December, favorite month of the year for me. Is that because
you've opened the first window on your advent calendar today?
That chocolate? No, Mike, yeah. I wasn't at home for that, as you well know. Yeah, and the elf on the shelf didn't oblige, even though I'm not a big fan of all that. But yeah, it's December. No, it's just August and December are planning recoup months for me. That is great data.
I've gone with I was listening to the weather forecast when traveling back home today, and it's going to be minus 10 degrees tonight in places in the UK.
That's bad data.
Well, it reminded me of when I was a kid, and you'd end up with a snow day or a cold weather day, and you wouldn't have to go to school. And so the good data is, if it's going to be that cold, maybe I'll get a snow day tomorrow. But then the bad. There is a bad side to that, which is I think the internet's ruined the anticipation of a snow day.
It's true, actually.
It's true.
I remember when there was a snow day before the pandemic many years ago when I was living in Clapham. and everyone steamed onto Clapham Common, had a massive snowball fight. It was fantastic.
Everyone will be working from home now.
Everyone would be expected to work from home and not miss a meeting. Yeah. No time for snowball fights. That's rubbish, isn't it? Well, anyway, that was a good one. Had any snowball fights? Hannah, you're in the countryside. Are you ever get stuck in the snow?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So I remember, and I still have the greatest. One of my team. So we where the office, when we first started, where the office was, it was very much in the country, and we got snowed in. And I was so impressed with one of my team. She had literally driven up, and one of the guys that got stuck, she opened a boot, took out a shovel, and started digging out the ice for them. I was like, "You're an absolute winner, girl." I was well impressed.
That's what happens when you recruit on values, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it. See what I did there? And so excellent. So bad data. I've got bad data. This is a bit of a weird one, especially in the world that I work in now. But 90% of online content may be AI generated within the next 3 years, and that number I've seen creep up. I'm now keep quite a keen eye on content and marketing, but obviously with what we do with Gen CFO. And I think it's crept up from like 60% to 70%. And the latest headline is like 90% of online content will be AI generated. And, I'm a great fan of technology, and we talk about Gen AI on here and in other forums. But I do wonder where the quality is going to go, and whether content in general is going to be very difficult to get anything original, or to get anything. Maybe this is where, the BBC and the sort of broadsheets start to come back in again, though. If basically everything that you read online is rubbish.
Yeah, I think the problem with AI content is that it looks like good quality. So for me, the problem with AI is the lack of original thought and all that creativity. And that's the bit that I worry about. I think the worst thing is we won't know it's a problem until it's a problem.
You want opinion, don't you? You want a personality. You want you want a random thought. You want a contra thought. And this is just kind of an aggregation of a lot of common thoughts.
Right. And so my immediate thought is one of the problems is it starts to feeding itself. Mm-hmm. So quite a lot of the sort of Gen AI stuff has been trained off the internet. If the internet is mainly made up of AI generated stuff, it's feeding itself. So any biases or skews that are there will just be exacerbated. So yeah, it's a worrying number.
And you had another one, Mike.
So I was listening to somebody talking about the COP28 in wherever it is. I was going to say it's in Dubai, but I don't think it is in Dubai. But 70,000 people are attending. And I just couldn't believe that 70,000 people were literally traveling into the Middle East to talk about climate. It just seems completely counterintuitive. I think I also heard somebody say that the whole COP process has now turned more into a trade fair than a discussion on taking action to prevent climate change. And it just feels like it almost feels like one of those meetings that I shouldn't go to, right? It's a no-go.
Yeah, green tech is a booming industry, no doubt. And if they've got an expo on the side of this, 70,000 people though, you all getting on a plane to go to COP28 just seems a bit weird. But we're not going to fix that one today. And I don't want to finish on such a downer. So happy December. Hopefully there is a snow day tomorrow, and if there is, it's Tuesday officially if you're listening to this on day of launch. So enjoy Wednesday off and just blame it on the snow. Hannah, thank you. Really, really nice to talk to you and hear all about ITAS. Where can people hear from you, connect to you, learn more about what you do?
Absolutely. So, of course, you can find me on LinkedIn, Hannah Munro. You might even find me under Lincoln, which is my maiden name. That's another story. And the website for ITAS is itassolutions.co.uk. While you're listening to this amazing podcast, don't forget to check out CFO 4.0 as well, which is available on all good podcast networks.
Absolutely. Subscribe to CFO 4.0. It's a brilliant podcast, and I love the name. Also subscribe to It's Not All About the Numbers. I've just got to finish on that because the algorithm might, take the wrong one. If you do want to send us any shout outs as well, we will do shout outs at this point at the end. And it could be anything from saying well done to the team, or, some charity work, or something that you want us to put out there so that people can find it. And you can do that by sending your emails. And I don't have a shout out this week, but I do just want to say thank you to Mike. Most people only hear him as co-host on this, but Mike's been supporting us in 2023 and finished on a high last night, I have to say. Being on the panel, it was Gen AI Mavericks, the need for speed in decision making, to which Mike was there as the non-finance. I'm not an accountant expert. And you blagged it really well,
Thank you very much.
So thank you for supporting our event. It was great. And Hannah, I hope to see you in London very soon. If not, we'll have to try and dig you out of the snow at some point.
Bring the shovel and I will be down there.
Well, thank you for listening, and thanks for being part of today. And remember, it's not all about the numbers.